Escape. To toss.
Gamble. To bet on an uncertain outcome as of a contest. To play a game of chance for stakes. To take a risk in the hope of gaining an advantage or a benefit. I bought these 3 packages. In total, it was a little over $100. The eBay seller listed these as untested, which means this could possibly be junk and my worst video and a total flop. But, sometimes
you gotta say, what the fuck?
Alright, place your bets, folks. Gamble number 1. Let's unbox this thing. I'm speeding this up so it's not so painful to watch. Sometimes on eBay you can find things that are listed that don't have any bids, and sometimes that's for a good reason, because maybe there's something that's obvious to everyone else, but when you're examining it, unless you know the ins and outs of whatever it is that you're purchasing, well, you might not see what is the problem, and that was sort of where I was beginning to doubt my decision of buying this thing in the first place. So I did manage to get it for $10, but after the shipping and taxes, it rounded up to about $50. But I think at this point you can pretty much guess what is in that package. Yeah, that's a 386. That's the baby AT board. And at the last minute, I was frantically searching the retro web to see if the BIOS was available for this board, and yes, there is something there. So I'm reluctant to purchase anything without knowing that there's an available BIOS. And as we all know, without a BIOS chip, you're pretty much looking at a parts board or something to hang on the wall. This is a Data Expert 367C Revision 1 unit chip 386 motherboard without a CPU, or the Math CoPro right there. And that is the socket. And according to the info you can find at the retro web, it will take several different CPUs, which is an exciting prospect. But I already know that there is some battery damage on this board. I could see that from the photographs, but it doesn't look all that bad. So it's time to clean up all the mess and take a look under the microscope. First thing I notice are a couple of spots which are gouges from who knows what, maybe sitting on top of other boards. I searched through and I circled everything that I could see that looked bad, and let me tell you, without the microscope, this stuff is easy to overlook. And my cheap setup, it's some wood that I've assembled just to raise it up high enough, and a $50 microscope. You don't need much, but man, is it helpful. Let me tell you, right there was the only break that I found on the board. Everything else was just scratched, and you can easily cover it with something, hopefully not the terrible nail polish that I used, but we'll see that later. What I did notice was a lot of bent over legs from the through hole components. So I went through with tweezers and I bent all the legs back straight, and I made sure that nothing was touching each other or shorting, because if I were to short something out and damage my CPU, for instance, that would be very disappointing. Next is the vinegar treatment to neutralize any of the damage that was caused by the battery spillage. And the battery damage can pretty much make or break something. That can turn my gamble into a complete loss. If the corrosion manages to seep in areas where it's next to impossible to fix, your board is junk. So, I don't know. This might not even work. But it does look pretty hopeful. So let's fix that broken trace. So I chose to do it like that. A simple little bodge wire. Those 2 spots were easy enough to solder to, so we were off to the races. Of course, as I was cleaning everything, I managed to cause this damage, which is unfortunate, and you can see that is no longer attached. Just the one leg is holding on. So I went back to my spare 486 parts board, and lo and behold, it uses, of course, the exact same crystal. So once I repaired that, I went to the battery terminals. I decided to repair that, although I didn't install a battery yet. Next was the CPU, and this is great. This is my 40 megahertz DX with one problem. Currently there are 2 broken legs as I'm demonstrating, but by the time I tried working on this, there were 3, so I had that to repair. Fortunately, I had a dead 486 chip. We'll explain how that went wrong later, but I took pins off of that and I soldered them on to the 386 chip, and there it is sitting pretty in the socket. In the bottom right corner is the replaced crystal, and it's quite a bit taller than the original. The board is completely dry from all the cleaning, and it's ready to put it on the test bench. Here we go, first boot. Fingers crossed. Hit the switch. And it gives 3 beeps, which is a memory problem. Second boot, second attempt. And I had put the RAM chips in bank 1, and they should have been in bank 0, of course. Here we go.
Oh, yes!
And that means that my CPU is good, which I had no idea. Boot number 3 with a keyboard. And sometimes the connector can be so corroded that there is no functioning keyboard, but we're about to find out if that's the case. What I just noticed is that it's saying CMOS display type mismatch. Keyboard works. And hopefully that error will go away once I've rebooted. So, I don't have a CMOS battery in this thing, so any change I make is only going to be saved as long as the power is still connected to it. Okay, there is no hard drive controller attached, so that's just fine. And there we are. 128K cache memory, fully functional, 40 megahertz CPU. 40 megahertz CPU clock. This looks like it's going to work. 128K cache memory. Well, I don't want to celebrate too early, but... Next, we need to try it with a hard drive. In that case, I'm using my compact flash, and the controller card goes in. Completing the DOS 622 installation. And in order to do that, I had to go through 1 floppy drive and 1 bad floppy. 99%. Will it complete? Sometimes it fails right here. And the failure, in my experience, is usually the compact flash card. If it's the 1 gig, it'll work on one machine, it won't work on another. It's just a hit and miss with these things. See what we get. Everything seems to be functioning exactly like it's supposed to with this computer. Fantastic. There we go. That is a good sign. I find that if it completely installs DOS 622 without any issues at all, that's a good sign. And usually the machine runs reliably. Alright, so next on the list is Phil's Computer Lab, the MS-DOS Starter Pack disk. That's what I load second after I load DOS. So let's just do that right now. It's such a time saver. You throw that in, install it, don't have to worry about anything else, basically. Alright, and we continue. Done. Next, I am going to load DOSBench. Fantastic. Okay, there's no CD-ROM or DVD, so that's why I got that error. But it's recognizing my mouse, and next I'm going to run DOSBench, which you can find at the Phil's Computer Lab website. When I first got this thing going, I had not installed the jumper for the turbo, and it was running very slowly. It was said 5.5 on the system information. And 41.4 is what it says, which maybe it could go faster. I don't know. But that seems pretty good to me. And if I do a quick... This is with my Oak, the OTI 077 card, which I have found is slower than even the Trident card that I have. 14.2. One last test. I didn't think to try this. Video gives me 3,000. And CPU 69 megahertz. So there it is, the Data Expert 367C, revision 1.0. And I have no idea if that bodge repair I did made any difference, because I didn't try this before. The way the leads were all twisted and touching on the bottom of the board, I probably would have fried something and ruined this right from the get-go. So, I'm not a gambling man, but this was my first win. Thank you very much. Thank you. Let's go on to gamble number 2, because this is a completely different creature. Gamble number 2 is a much smaller package, and I'm going to break into this much faster this time. This gamble is a 50-50 win or lose. Either it works or it doesn't work. There is no repairing what's inside of this tiny little package, and you've probably guessed by now that that is a CPU. You can see the gold legs on there, giving it all away. So what kind of CPU is this, and why did I bother to gamble on this thing? One word, and that word is duality. Okay, actually 2 words. The other word is overeager, or hasty, or you should have spent more time before you hit the buy button, basically. So the seller had this listed as the Intel Celeron Duality 1300 megahertz. And these are the 2 photos that were on the listing. But every time I looked at those photos, this is what I was seeing, because I put my stupid mouse cursor on the picture. And this only makes sense because it was down to the last couple of minutes before the item was going to be gone. I saw Tualatin, I didn't see anything else, I didn't see Celeron, and I immediately bought the thing, and it was about $20, which isn't a huge amount of money for the thing, but at the same time, I probably could have found it for cheaper if I'd looked longer. So, having said that, it is a 1300 megahertz chip, and I do have a motherboard that will accept it, which is more difficult than I had imagined. Okay. Celeron 1.3 gigahertz chip installed in the GA6V-TXE board. We've got 256 megs of RAM. I have an unknown video card that I was given, and well, we'll just see if it works, and if it doesn't, I'll try a different video card. So here we go. Got my power switch. I'm going to give the power supply power. Nothing has blown up yet, that's good. And I'm hitting the switch. This is where only a few seconds seems to take a lot longer than it actually does. It's that, oh my god, I wasted my money, what a stupid thing to do, and hey, it works! Look at that. So the reason I'm so impressed is this chip is unsupported. Wow. But thanks to this YouTube video that I found, it works. They had this board and they had this chip. Look at that. And the video card works too. So it wasn't a waste of $20. And I have a Celeron sort of Tualatin 1300 megahertz P3 CPU, which I'm going to do a bunch of testing on, comparing it to my 1000 megahertz chip, and see if there's any increase in performance with the Celeron. And once again, before I celebrate too soon, I want to do a couple of tests just to see if this thing is doing anything correctly. And according to DOS Bench, it appears as if it is. And while I was there, I decided to do a little VGA benchmark test, and it came up with 297, so yeah, I'm sure that's probably just fine. So it's not an actual Tualatin chip, but it is a winner. Well, we have one more gamble, and that is gamble number 3. Since this is all from the same seller, I've had 2 successes, relatively. So I'm feeling a little more confident with this one. So this one, I bid and I lost, and then I bid and then I lost, and then I bid and I won. So I ended up paying a little more for this one. I didn't want to, but, that's the luck of the draw. I actually had no intentions on buying anything else until I checked out the first package, but I just didn't get around to it. It sat on my shelf for about a month, and then I found this listing, and I could not say no. When everything else you see is listed for a couple $100, sometimes up to $300, you see a listing like this, and it's too tempting. It's just far too tempting. I've had mixed results trying to repair retro hardware, so for me, this is definitely a gamble. For a guy like Necroware, aka Scorp, he has the ability to logistically go through and diagnose faults. I have more of a mechanical approach to this. I'm looking at things that are broken because of age, because of corrosion failure, because of things being piled on top of each other. There's so many mechanical reasons why these boards will fail, and here it is. This is the Edom/Wintech MA013-X, and the info at RetroWeb specifically says, beware of battery damage, and this didn't look as bad in the picture. But now that it's actually in my hands and I'm able to examine it with my own eyes and under the microscope, we're going to find out just how bad that corrosion from the battery dumping its guts. We're going to find out exactly how bad that is. But otherwise, it looks pretty good. Microscope view. This is right beside the keyboard connector. And already you can see some of the corrosion around the solder joints. And there's that crusty business. Sometimes that's just a little bit of corrosion you can wipe off and you're on your way, but other times it has completely devoured any of the copper traces and you've got to replace them. And there seems to be some kind of sticky fluid on that chip, but let's give it the vinegar treatment. Then give it a light scrubbing, and hopefully something is left on the board. Now, I don't immediately see any bubbling happening. Oh, yeah, there's a little bit. I'm focusing on the battery area, but it has spread quite a bit on this board, and as it's leaked down, I want to make sure that I get every last bit of that stuff gone and then neutralize it so it doesn't cause any more damage. And as I examine this under the microscope, I'm already starting to feel my neck, and that, oh my God, I spent more on this thing? Yeah, and moron is the word of choice here, because where do you start? Where do you start with all this damage? Well, you start this way. This was the finest wire that I could find quickly, and it's, probably about the thickness of a human hair. And where do you start? There were so many things to fix. I wasn't sure if I was going to have to pull all the cache sockets out. Maybe I was going to have to pull out the RAM sockets. It all depends on what is lurking underneath. So I thought about it for a little while, and then I decided, well, I'm just going to start with the stuff that is obvious. And those were the traces that were right where the battery leaked. And I am struggling to do this. If you've ever watched Bits und Bolts and you thought, that looks pretty easy actually, I could do that. Well, think again, because this is really, really difficult. As I'm floundering to do this, I'm looking at my computer monitor. I'm not even looking at the board as I'm trying to manipulate the tiny little screwdriver to hold that down. The solder doesn't want to stick to the wire, the solder doesn't want to stick to the corroded traces on the board, and once you finally do get it to stick to the trace, you put a little heat into that wire and then it releases all the solder joints because it's conducting the heat in a split second, and it completely ruins everything that you wasted the last 10 or 15 minutes working on. So I'm using that screwdriver as a bit of a heat sink. And at this point, I am really deciding whether or not this was a bad idea, because I'm having little to no luck. And it just... Oh, look at that. Finally, I managed to get something to stick down on the board. So I have to hold the wire down tight onto the board, otherwise the solder will not reach. And still, it is just not working. But just above that, you can see the two wires that I already managed to get to solder down. I found that if I did the extreme ends and then touch in the middle and go along that way, I was able to get it to work a little bit better. Because holding the wire down with that tiny little screwdriver that I filed into that shape, it's really easy to poke things and then rip the wire off in a matter of seconds. And I had to redo this so many times over and over again because of the wire just popping off. But little by little, I managed to get enough solder connections. Basically, it only matters to get from one end to the other. But you got to make sure the wires don't touch. And this reassures me that, I've got the spacing correct. And just kind of wedge that down a little bit. And hopefully, the traces that are actually still on the board are just so fine and cracked and pitted that there's just not a lot to grab to. And without the microscope, this would never have happened. I'm using this free app, I think it's called Quick View, and you're able to rotate the screen because if you have to do this upside down with an upside down view of it, it would be totally impossible. This is too fine and too... Look at that, I just broke that connection right there. Anyway, so... little by little, because when I first started this, I thought, oh boy, I've bit off more than I can chew. I thought, hey, if those guys can do it, maybe I can do it too. And when I tried, oh, there you go, I got some connection there. But when I tried it, I was getting the wires popping off, nothing was sticking down. Now, I am using the cheapest flux possible. It's that little pot of it you can get from AliExpress. I've got a syringe of that Chip Quick, but I thought I would try this first. And, it was probably a bad choice, but this is how you learn. You got to try things out. So I have never done this kind of fine soldering before. Mainly because I don't have one of those handy magnifying stands that everyone seems to be buying now. And I thought, yeah, well, maybe I need to get one of those. But then I thought, why not try? Why not just see if I can do this? And a friend had given me an old Mac Mini, and I have it by my workbench now. That's what's connected to this monitor that you're looking at. And sure enough, it's just enough to enlarge it to the size where you can actually manipulate it. And look at that. I've got solid connections happening. Oh, well, near solid. Yeah. Well, it's time to clean the board off and see where we are. I'm not sure if after scrubbing it, any of those wires are still going to be where they're supposed to be. And yeah, some of it's kind of ugly. But like I said, I've never attempted this before, and this is very difficult work. And of course I found another spot that was a broken trace, so I had to repair that one, then clean it up. And I'm using a fine brush here with the isopropyl to hopefully wash off all of the flux that I had to slather on the board. So, of course, you got to make sure that the board is very clean before you put anything on it to protect those wires. Now, I would have preferred to use proper solder mask, the UV curable sort, but failing that, I didn't have any, and I asked my lovely lady if she had any nail polish, and this is what it looks like when you use pink nail polish on your 386 board. But, at this point, I was still thinking, this is a pig in a poke. I made myself a little chart here. I just took a photograph of the board and then printed that out and put the parts on it. So let's see what happens. First, boot. Here we go. Do we get explosions? Nothing. Get nothing. And this is what I was afraid of. I have no idea of the state of the CPU on this board. There could be more traces that are broken, but oh, hey, look at that. It's 0605. And I have no idea what that code means, but something is definitely not right because it's hard to see, but the LEDs are slightly flickering. There's something strange about the power on this board. There's still more corrosion that I'm going to have to deal with. I give it another attempt and flatline. And you can see that slightly blinking LED. Now, I've experienced this before where that connector can be corroded, and if you give the wires a bit of a shake, suddenly it'll come to life. So I'm hoping that, oh, and there it is. So that annoying sound is actually it's a good sign. It means that it's complaining about the RAM, perhaps. But still, I get nothing. Nothing at all. Well, yeah, I'm disappointed. But, like I said, I've been here before, and that connector can be problematic. And, well, it is. It is problematic. Now, I'm not hooting and hollering yet because, well, I can barely even see anything on the screen. I didn't even realize that there was actually anything on the screen. The camera's seeing it better than I am. But there it is. There is life in this board. And just like the previous board, it gave me that display mismatch. So now you can't really see it very well with this picture, but that is a fuzzy, grainy image, and it's really dim. And I know the VGA card was working before I put it in this board. So, has it damaged the VGA? Like, how do I know? This thing has got all kinds of corrosion. Maybe for some reason it's not getting full voltage and that's why it's doing this. I don't know, and I am getting a little concerned about that. So, I'm going to restart, and it's still very dim. Well, it's complaining about the hard drive controller, but there currently isn't one in there. And the next thing I notice is this. That's peculiar. So I go into the BIOS and I eliminate the floppy drive and I get out of there. In my previous attempt, I had disabled the external cache. This time I have disconnected the computer from power, so it is defaulted to enable cache. And that's why I'm getting this error. So I'm going to disable it again, and then we're going to restart and see what we get. Oh, well, that's peculiar. So not only is it not working correctly, it is now frozen. And I'm starting to think that maybe there's something very wrong with this computer. The display is still very dim and it's kind of hard to read. And now the computer just sort of hangs at that spot. And that's even worse than it was the last time. And the camera doesn't even like it. So, yeah. So one more time, just to bang my head against the wall, drive myself even more crazy with this thing. Yep. Fail. Total fail. But after a bit more jiggling, and I jiggled the cards in there, I put the controller card in, I now have the floppy drive hooked up. So I tried the hard drive controller card in a different slot, and suddenly I was able to get into MS-DOS. It correctly read my disk, it was no longer freezing, it was booting correctly, and I thought maybe I've figured something out. So it seems as if the first ISIS slot is a little crusty or something and was giving me errors with the hard drive. Now it recognizes the drive, and I'm going to once again restart this machine and hopefully boot into DOS with my CF card. So here we go. And I'm speeding this up. Sure enough, works just fine. I'm starting DOS bench, and let's see what system information says about this computer, how fast it's running, because it's a little slow. And it's 14.5 slow compared to the 41 that the previous machine was running at. So it occurred to me, oh, well, maybe it's because I didn't put the jumper on the turbo switch. So I fiddle around, and it goes down to 4.8. And then it dawned on me it's because of the cache. Thus begins the cache ordeal. These sockets are filthy. I sprayed them with contact cleaner and I scrubbed them, and you can see a little bit of the green on them. And the legs of the cache chips were really corroded. There's no way that they were making any contact. So I noticed this as well, that I had bent one of the legs like a moron, and well, that gave me a little hope. Maybe it's just a bent leg. Alright, so, cache chips. This is an NKK cache chip, and it is not recognized by the programmer, but I'm going to use the standard SRAM, and it's a 61256. And when I attempt to test it, I just get data bus test error. Sometimes I find when you jiggle them around a little bit, you can get results magically, but this one, there's two chips that act like this. Doesn't matter what I do. Sometimes I get just a little bit of reading, a little blue line, but no. Yep. Nothing. Well, it's the next day, and I have cleaned off the contacts for the power. I have replaced the cache chips with good cache chips. And let's hope it works. Here we go. Here we go. Power. Nothing. Yeah, that's great. It's even worse than it was before. So now I'm getting absolutely no startup, no boot. What have I done? What have I done? Yeah. That is the sound of frustration. But we've got more to fix. So I decided to pull the power connector out and replace it with one that came out of that spare parts 486 board. So there was quite a bit of corrosion on the other connector, so I decided just to eliminate that from the issue. But when I searched on the board again, I discovered that one of the tiny little connections had come loose. And fortunately for me, acetone easily removes the nail polish, so I'm going to remove all that ugly crap and then replace it with the proper solder mask at some point. Doing some cleanup here and making sure that those wires are far enough apart. And because I had fought with this for several hours already, I was feeling a little more confident with my micro soldering skills. And I think rather than the power connector, it was more than likely this loose connection that was causing it not to boot correctly anymore. Because every time I moved the board, it was slightly flexing that and perhaps making a tiny little connection. So after fighting with it for a while, I finally got those two wires soldered down correctly. Okay, here we go. We have worked on the power connector. We repaired the frayed wire of the trace. And more likely the cache will not work still. But let's just see if this thing will fire up on the first shot. So, here we go. Oh. Hey, it's doing something. That worked way better. That was immediate. So, what do we got? What about the cache? Still have a dead cache? Yeah, we do. But it's so bright, and it didn't take any time for that to fire up. Okay, here we go. Second attempt, and I have plugged in the CF card and the floppy drive, and the hard drive controller is in. Let's see if it fires up immediately. Yes! Oh, that's nice. Okay, resume. Look at that. Starting MS-DOS. That's starting with the floppy. Oh, and it just failed. Come on, really? Really? Oh. And it's not a problem. Well, that's disappointing. Actually, it's not. It was just this. I forgot that when I disconnected the power supply, of course, it defaults and it always sends it back to the 5 1/4. And let's see if MS-DOS will start correctly this time. Still have bad cache. That's fine. Starting MS-DOS. Come on. Still clickety-clicking. That's good. Yep. Okay. Whew. So this is where I realized that first ISIS slot is definitely a problem. It had sort of slipped my mind because there was just a bunch of faults. So, all right, I moved the controller card into another slot, and what do we get? Every single time it fires up. First time. That's a very satisfying feeling. And right in MS-DOS, expanded memory. Good. We still don't have cache, but I think we're going to have to look at that at a later point because this video has got to get completed. So, I feel pretty good about this.
Say what?
Would you actually want to watch this video and never see the completion of the cache? Wouldn't that be disappointing? So I had to try a little more. All right. This is the third attempt at trying to do this. I have replaced the cache socket, and let's see if we have any luck. So the socket that was closest to the battery was the one that was damaged. It had continuity issues. So I replaced that one, and I hoped for the best. Okay. F1. Right CMOS. Yep. Okay. No. We still have bad cache. Why is that? Just about to give up. So close. So I found this when I was examining the cache sockets. That one right there has a little break right there. And when I put the continuity tester between those 2 points, I was getting no sound. Continuity there, but I don't get it on the solder joint. There is a clear break, and that needs to be repaired. So this could be the fault, or this could be one of many faults. I'm going to bridge that, and we'll see if that makes a difference. Okay, I'm going to scrape a little bit of this away. I'm going to attempt to anyway. Amazingly, it gets easier and easier to manipulate the tiny tools under the microscope the more you do it. And that's beginning to make sense. Well, hopefully that'll do. I have a feeling that did not work. And I tested it, and no, it didn't, so I had to go back and try it again. I needed to scrape off a little more of the solder mask in order to get it, and this time it's ugly, but it definitely bridged the gap. So okay, well, we have continuity now. I'm going to clean that solder joint up. Okay, we have done the repair on the trace, and we're ready to fire it up and see if it works yet. Fingers crossed. I'm not going to jinx it. Oh, there we go. Wait. Oh. Yes! Yoo-hoo! Fixed! Okay, so we have the controller card back in. I want to see what the speed is going to be this time. Oh, I love how it does that. I guess I'm going to have to fix the battery on this thing too. That's another issue. Okay, so let's do this. Nope. I gotta catch it quicker. Oh, yep. Okay. So, auto detect. Yep. Okay, and is that it? That's it. That's it. Right to CMOS. Yes. Oh, look at that. Boom, that's fast. Oh, well, whatever. Okay, so there's no mouse. That's fine. Yeah, and that seems faster already. Yeah, okay, so Alt benchmarks CPU speed 43.3. Okay. Very good. That's the difference the cache makes. Brought it all the way from 14.5 up to 43.3, which that's a substantial difference. So that means that the processor is running at full speed. I have nothing to worry about. So what about this? Oh, 13.3. Not as good, but well, that's what you get. Okay, that's it. I think we're done. We are done gambling with untested hardware. Gamble 3? Well...
Wow! Congratulations!
There we go. 2 functional 386 boards, which may have been scrapped to somebody else, but amazingly I was able to get them to work. Minus that port, but I don't really care. That's just fine. I may decide to remove that and put in a replacement, but until then, that's just fine, because I've still got 4 fully functional, and I'm only going to use 3 of them anyway, so... But, there we go. The chip in the Pentium board, the Pentium 3 board, that's obviously fully functional too. So, all in all, for me, this has been an absolute success, and I couldn't be more happy about this. I was really beginning to think that I had wasted my money, and apparently I didn't. So, next time, we're going to put some stuff together. Oh yeah, did I mention that I've got one of these? Yeah, we'll have to try that too. In the next video, we're going to open these 2 boxes, and we're going to build a machine. Stick around for that. Thanks to all my subscribers and the comments people have been leaving and all the interaction and that and things I've been learning from people. I can't thank you enough. Let's make some more interesting videos and keep this retro thing going.